This week, we're going to be diving into our Maya Mash tools. Mash networks are ways that we can manipulate our models and then procedurally animate them. So I have my Mash tab here on my shelf, and this is where I can access some of my Mash tools. The first thing that we need is we need some kind of model or something to be creating a Mash network from. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a cube, and I'm going to create a Mash network from this cube. So after I've created my geometry, I'll go to my Mash tab here, and then I'll click this first box. And what we see is now in our outliner here, I have a mash node, and then my cube, you see that it's been duplicated here in the scene, and it's also been grayed out, meaning that it's no longer visible, but now I have this Mash repro mesh, which is visible, and that's now my object here. So if I click this and go to my attribute editor, this is where I'm able to, you can see here, even if I click on P cube, that there's a number of new nodes attached to this object. And if I go to my Mash tab, my Mash object here in my outliner, I can see all of the different options that I have. So the first procedural animation is a way that through code and through kind of these nodal networks or these packets of code that Maya has created for us, we're able to run the animation, properties of the animation through different elements. And you'll see what I mean once we get started here. But it's really powerful and really fun to work with, and I really hope you enjoy this next set of tutorials and this next assignment. So here I have my Mash network here, and the first, whenever I create a Mash waiter, which is what this box does, it creates this. It transforms whatever my initial geometry is, and it creates a Mash network out of it. It will always create this Mash distribute, which is the first tab. So this video will get into what this Mash distribute node does. So let's click on it here. And basically this gives us a number of options and parameters that we can adjust, and we can also key all of these things to do some keyframe animation as well. But it allows us to set up how many iterations of this object get created within our Mash network. So the first thing is the number of points, because basically what we're doing is with a Mash network, we're creating, a number of points or numerical values that are assigned to each one of these objects that then get kind of duplicated, but then they're also manipulated or modified based on the other Mash nodes that we add to our network, or based off of the parameters that we're using. So the first thing here is, I can increase the number of points, and you can see that it has a distance here of 20 units. And so that's how, that's the span of this particular distribution method. And then it's going to fill in a number of iterations that we have based on the number of points that we're creating. If I change this X value, I can stretch out my Mash network or collapse it. And the same here, there's a lot of different parameters, and there's different distribution types. To center the distribution means that, now I'm going off of the origin in both directions, and not starting at the origin and then going out in the positive direction. But I can change the Y offset. I can change the Z offset. I can change the rotation. And you see that what it's going to do is that it's going to add a degree, whatever that rotation degree is. It's going to basically add that to whatever that last iteration is. So it's taking that first cube, and then each subsequent cube has this value associated with it, right? Same with Z. We can rotate it in any direction. We can scale it. So this is a way that I can really very, very easily kind of duplicate an object, but then manipulate it and have an animation run based on based on the network itself. So this is just the distribute tab, and this is just the linear distribution type, and that has these values associated with it. There are others here. There's radial. Okay, so if I select radial, then it will distribute my mesh, repro mesh across a kind of sphere, and then I have my radius. And I have this Z offset, which is why it's kind of curling it. I can make it like a kind of pure circle here, or I can have a Z offset. The angle, I can maybe say like 720 and have it go around twice and offset that Z and make a spiral. And then these are things that I can obviously key as well. So like let's say I set this key here, and then at frame 60 I can offset that Z set key. So there are ways that we can use the MASH network to do keyframe animation, but then also really complicated procedural animation. I'm going to go ahead and break this connection here and go back to the beginning. So this is the radial type. I have spherical type, which means that it will, depending on, I can keep increasing the number of points, and the resolution of this kind of sphere will become more and more obvious. I guess 100 might be, let's see, 1,000, right? We can see now that this really looks like a sphere, and I can change the radius of this thing and have it explode out perhaps, which is another thing that we can do procedurally here, but these are just some parameters or attributes that we can mess around with here within this distribute tab. Mesh is something interesting. So it says that we have this warning that says please connect to mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and for mesh, let me reduce the number of points here because that's way too many points. I don't want to have Maya crash on me. So let's just say for now 20 points. And I need to distribute across a mesh. This is exactly maybe what you think it is, which is I can take a different mesh here. Let's say this torus. Okay, and let me scale my torus up. I have this torus here, and I have my my mesh network. And what I want to do here is basically to use the distribution type of mesh, I'm going to have my mesh geometry reproduce itself at points on another mesh. So in order to do that, I need an input mesh here. It says, and I need to drag and drop by right-clicking in my outliner on the mesh that I want to distribute on, and then dropping it into that input mesh. And now you can see that kind of randomly, because the method is scatter, I have placed these cubes on this torus. So I can kind of increase it here. There's different methods. So there's scatter. There's also vertex. So all the vertices for any component of a mesh any component of an object is going to have numerical values assigned to it, even if you can't see them here in the scene. And so if I have, let's say, 100 points, it's going to place my mesh cubes at each vertex point starting at 0 and then going up to 100. So I can try to guesstimate how many vertex points are here on my torus, or I can say flood mesh, and it will flood every vertex point of my torus will have a cube attached to it. If I go to my torus here and maybe increase my subdivisional axes, I will get more and more of those cubes also attached to it. I can also choose random vertex, which doesn't matter if I have it on flood mesh. But random vertex will just choose random numbers instead of having them in a sequential order. Then there's face center, so you can see how that shifts or changes. That might be hard to see, but you can see here that our cubes are placed at the vertices. And if I choose face center. Instead, it's at the center of each face. And then I have other things like voxel, which is a kind of volumetric pixel, and this looks kind of what's that game that I don't play, but you probably have all played? Everything's very pixelated. Anyhow, I'll remember it later. Then I have edge, so they'll be along the edges. Okay, so these are just different ways you can distribute across a mesh. And then I have another one, that the last one I want to show you is initial state. Let me get rid of this torus. And initial state, there's just a number of them that are all kind of piled atop the central origin. And this might be useful for some of our other MASH nodes that we'll end up adding to this main distribute node. So in my nodal structure here, right, so whether I'm on my MASH repro mesh or this MASH tab or P cube is just going to lead me to the MASH repro mesh. So if I'm here, I will have some of the same tabs as here. But what we can see is we have our main shape tabs and global transform tabs. But then we have our MASH 1 tab, and so this is where we can add different MASH nodes, and this is where the fun kind of starts. So we're going to get into some of these this week. And then we have our, the MASH distribute node, which is allowing us to choose which way do we want to. Oh, we also have grid, right? So grid allows you to create a grid of those iterations of that original mesh. So I can say I want a grid of 5 by 5 by 5. I can type in the numerical values here. And so I'm able to fill in. And distribute center means it just centers it. So that's the distribute tab. In our next video, we'll get into more of these MASH nodes.